Hello, and welcome to the next episode of the Anti-Contractor Home Podcast. I'm Chance.
And I'm Belinda. In this podcast, we look at different methods of construction, different methods of putting together a home. We try to find a way of building a house that can be taken care of by the homeowner, something that's low maintenance, something that's easy to construct, easy to renovate, something that doesn't require contractors in the construction and care of the home.
We want to give the homeowner the power, give the power back to the homeowner.
Yes.
And let them take control of their home.
So in the last few podcasts, we talked about wood construction, and under that we covered stick frame and timber frame. And then we talked about steel construction, and we covered rigid framing, which is the hot rolled steel members, and we also covered light gauge steel framing. And then last week, we talked about concrete construction. And in that podcast, we covered CMU block homes, CMU block walls, ICF, which are insulated concrete forms, and tilt wall, or precast concrete panels.
Yeah, and I think we just sort of gave some information on our knowledge we gathered from those different construction types and what we know about them. In this podcast, we're going to look at these different types of constructions under certain categories and rate them, because all these construction methods are valid construction methods. They're what we would consider to be good. They're sufficient. We would be happy to have a home with any of these done with any of these construction methods.
That's true. Yeah.
But we want to see under these specific categories, we want to investigate what's good, what's better, and what's the absolute best in terms of an anti-contractor home.
So the first category we're going to talk about is DIY ability.
And that's do it yourself. That is, if you were to be the builder, instead of hiring a contractor to do any of your building, if you had the time and you're willing to put in the labor, that would be to build the house yourself.
Yeah. And under good, we would put in ICF, insulated concrete forms.
Yes, because you can only take it so far before you have to have a contractor come in and pour your concrete.
That's right. So you can put all the insulated forms up yourself. You can probably buy it at a local manufacturer. There are several in Dallas near where we live. But you still need a contractor to reinforce all those blocks. And then you need a cement truck to come to your site to pour the concrete in between those forms.
And
set your walls.
That's not including the complex system that is waterproofing for the exterior.
Exactly. Yeah. So that part is not DIY friendly.
Right. So what would be better than ICF?
Stick framing.
Yeah, because you can go to Home Depot and you can buy a bunch of 2x4s, 2x6s, 8s, 12s, whatever you need, and bring them to your site and start building.
Yeah.
There's no limit.
There are no barriers to start
this. There's no barriers to entry on that.
Yeah. It's not very difficult to figure it out. Because it's so widely used in the States, there are so many resources available online where you can just learn how to put up a stick frame wall or stick frame home as well.
Yeah, a lot of resources because it's done in 80% of the construction around the U.S. But the all-time best or the best
in our
method
opinion
of construction for DIY ability would be steel, in particular prefabricated steel, because with that method you would be your whole system is engineered and made off-site in a shop, all welded together. Everything's good to go. You have parts and pieces that come onto your site, and you just bolt them together. And once that's done, your whole structure is complete. Now it's time to clad and insulate.
Correct. So we could consider timber framing to be a prefab system as well.
Yeah, that's very similar to steel, I would say.
Large forms made cleaned up and formed to shape in a factory and then brought to your site.
Yeah, just mortise and tenon with some dowels. Very simple, straightforward. There's no complex connection details, really.
Yeah.
And it's like putting together a puzzle. So looking at the next category, which is speed of construction, how quick you can get your structure up in order to continue to finish out your home. I would say a good method would be stick framing, because you can get a stick frame up pretty fast. I think there's faster methods, but you can definitely, if you need certain materials, like we said, it's all readily available. The resources are everywhere, but there's still some limitations to how long it takes because there's so many members.
Yeah.
And you have to consider things like rain, because if it were to rain or something, then you're delayed on your site until everything dries out.
Yes. Okay. So last week we visited a home in Frisco that's just a typical suburban home, and with ridiculously pitched roofs. And it was really funny when you walk through the home, you see all these large 12, 15-foot pieces of wood holding up or bracing these pitched roofs.
Yeah, they had just gotten the framing complete.
Yes, so none of the walls were, there was no drywall up. So you could see the framing of the entire house.
Yeah, and I would assume that all those extra braces that just look like a bunch of 2x4s nailed in place was not part of the engineered drawings.
Yeah, they just figured it out on site. So that's not the fastest method of construction. Something better than that would be ICF.
Definitely, because you can, once you get your blocks, you can start stacking them up. They're like Legos.
It's a modular system.
Yeah, big Legos.
Yeah.
And just depending on how complex the exterior of your home is, the exterior wall of your home would determine how quick you can get your ICF structure built. I think the one thing that would delay you is getting a concrete contractor on site to pour your concrete, and you have to consider the time you have to wait for the concrete to cure.
Yes.
Especially if you're pouring a second floor or something like that, a second level of walls.
That's true. So the best and fastest method of construction, in our opinion, would be, again, something prefabricated.
Yes. With steel, like we said before, these members all come on site ready to go, and it's like putting together a puzzle. You just bolt them in, and you're ready to go.
So in addition to steel and timber framing, we could probably also add precast concrete panels to this category, because that's all figured out in a factory beforehand, poured, cured, and then brought to the site, and it's just tilted up in place. There's no curing, there's no drying of materials. It's just ready to go for the next stage of construction.
Yes. Yeah. And so one of the most important categories that people want to consider is cost, maybe the most important category. But we feel it's important to break this down to two different categories, because the upfront cost is significantly different than the life cycle cost.
Yeah, it's very easy to ignore the life cycle cost. You talk about how much materials cost up front. You don't think about how much they cost in the long term. And those costs can add up really quickly.
Yeah,
So.
and it also depends on your use for this house. But we're looking at something that's going to last a long time, something that's low maintenance. So we definitely will consider putting more in on the upfront cost. But what would be good in those terms?
ICF would be the most expensive, so that would be under the good category.
Yeah, we say good because it's not. I mean, it's reasonable.
It is.
And the one issue is concrete in your area. It varies in price drastically around the states.
Finding trained contractors who know what they're doing with the ICF system, that's difficult to find.
Yeah, because you want it done right. It's such a permanent system that you don't want some Joe Schmo who's you don't want, I don't know why I always use Joe. I make fun of Joe. You don't want some stick frame builder coming out there and saying, yeah, I can do this ICF thing. It seems simple. Just pour the concrete in and we're good to go.
Yeah. So the scarcity of those kind of contractors could probably increase the cost of construction.
That's true. They can sort of name their own price.
Yeah.
You can't exactly go to the next contractor and say, hey,
go to the next Joe Schmo.
Yeah. Joe Schmo. So what would be
better? I think in Dallas, steel is not as expensive as in other places like rural areas because of how much commercial construction goes on in this area, and they mainly use steel.
Yeah, that's true. I guess if you're closer to the city or a city, then it could be easier to have access to steel because it is prefabricated off-site and it's brought on-site. And if your site's in Marfa, Texas, it could be pretty expensive, which is really in the middle of nowhere. But if it's in Dallas, like where we are, then it may not be near as expensive. what's the best upfront cost? I mean, I think it's
Stick.
obvious. Yeah.
Yeah.
We all know it's stick frame. I mean, 2x4s are what, $2?
Yeah, something like that. That's buying it from Home Depot. You
That's
buy it
true.
in
That's not
bulk,
even
it's
wholesale.
probably cheaper.
So I think that's pretty obvious.
And nowadays
upfront
they've
cost.
come out, again, going back to that site that we visited, they've come out with these new type of framing members that are finger jointed. So they use scraps of other pieces of wood to make these 2x4s. And they're strong. They do what they need to do when they're in the vertical, used as a vertical member. So that's kind of bringing down the cost of construction.
Yeah. I don't know how new those are, though. I feel like that's been around. Finger joints. Been
Definitely
around
not
for a
used in our house.
while. This house.
Yeah, in this house 60 years ago.
Yeah.
So the next category we're going to talk about is durability.
And that has to do with how your home can weather the storm, really. I mean,
That's a good way of putting it.
yeah, how it can hold up to age and the weather. Like in our area, we have tornadoes to deal with. In tropical climates, you would have hurricanes to deal with, and just age in general. And
Or snow loads in the northern areas.
yeah, and what's going to be standing 100 years from now?
Yeah, or at least 50.
Right.
Yeah.
And one thing that's standing for at least 50 years is a stick frame home. So we consider that to be pretty good because our house is a stick frame house.
It's a 60-year-old home.
Yeah, and it's still in pretty good shape. I mean, there's a lot of warping and bending and a lot of cracked drywall because of that, but it's in good shape. It works. It holds the roof up and it keeps us dry. The concern with stick is that if your exterior is not sealed properly, like if your moisture barrier isn't done very well, the water that gets in could really damage your wood, rot, mildew, things like that.
Yeah, because there's organic matter in it too, so that could be food for termites.
Yes, that's true. And those are issues that you don't deal with when it comes to
Steel.
something that's better than wood for durability, which is steel. Because you have little to no movement. You have steel's going to last.
Yeah,
a long
there's no
time.
creep. And could we lump in timber framing with this? Well, that's still...
I was going to mention termites because
Yeah.
you can't put timber framing in there because they don't like steel. They do like timber framing. though.
Yeah. So maybe we just stick to steel under this category.
Yeah, we would say that's better than wood as far as durability goes. But
Yeah.
the most durable structure from our research is going to be ICF
Correct.
for sure, because it's one monolithic structure that is going to handle a tornado,
Yeah.
a hurricane. It's going to stand
Your
the
roof
test of
can
time.
be ripped off in a tornado,
Right.
but your walls are going to still be standing.
Yeah, and just look at all ancient structures. What are they built out of?
Brick and mortar,
Yeah.
concrete,
Yeah.
cement, some form of that.
And contrasting that, it would be renovations. If you do need to change up your home, if you need to fix it up, if you want to add on to it, things like
Yes.
that.
Mm-hmm.
And that's where we sort of flip the script, because
That's true.
we would consider ICF just to be good, because once it's set, it's set. You're not changing anything about that house.
Yeah, you have to be happy with the sides of your home, because any sort of change to the exterior wall is going to be very disruptive to your home. You have to basically jackhammer a hole if you want to add an extra window or something, jackhammer through that concrete. Or you want to add another opening for pipe or to pass wires through it, or
Yeah.
plumbing, whatever. To have to drill through all that concrete is not an easy task.
Right. So we would consider steel to be actually better than ICF when it comes to renovations, because it's fairly straightforward.
And these large spans in
Right.
between the members, so you have that flexibility to do whatever you want between that span. So renovate it in whatever way you want.
Your interior renovations could be very easily done.
So you're saying that the exterior frame could be the load-bearing walls. Your interior frame could probably aren't. So you can do whatever you want, manipulate the interior walls
Right.
in whatever way you want.
You have an open plan.
Yeah.
The best is the most common, which is stick framing.
All the HGTV homes that we watch, everything that you all watch too, that's all let's just bring a sledgehammer and break down this wall, make a giant opening between your kitchen and your living room, right?
Right, for a more open concept.
So it's very easy to manipulate a stick frame home.
Yeah, and still make it look like one cohesive piece.
Yeah.
When it comes to living in your house, one big concern is how energy efficient your home is, in particular your heating and cooling load, how well your house can be sealed. So when it comes to the good category for this, I would think you could put stick and steel together because they're very similar.
Yeah.
In the way they're done. This has a lot to do with how your home is insulated.
Exactly. Like you can have great R values with a stick frame home, just like by doubling up the number of the studs, having extra insulation. But we're talking about the typical way in which a stick frame home is built. It's not that well insulated. Is that also because there are lots of seams occurring in these stick frame homes and steel frame homes, because there's the framing member, it's cladded, and then there's moisture barriers, all these different things. There's so many penetrations for air and water, thermal bridges.
There's so many of those. You could put steel lower than stick because steel is more of a conductor.
We covered this in the podcast.
Yeah. So go back and watch that. So this is just meant to be a quick overview. Better than stick and steel.
Timber and tilt. And why would timber frame be more energy efficient? I mean, it's still clad the same way stick framing is. Is it maybe because there are fewer members involved in a timber frame, so you have more continuous insulation?
Yes. Yeah, and I think
there are less breaks.
A very popular way to insulate a timber frame is to use SIPs. That's not common in a stick frame house.
That's true.
And SIPs have a better R value, and they, like you mentioned, they have fewer bridges, thermal bridges.
Yeah, because they're large, 4x8 sheets or something. Yeah. So they cover a larger area, so there's less opportunity for heat loss or heat gain. Yeah,
in our concrete podcast, we also discussed a tilt wall that has foam insulation embedded within it, which could be a nice, solid, continuous insulator. Far and away the best is ICF, for sure.
Yeah, because it's a double insulated wall, basically. Yes. You have insulation on both sides.
And not only do you have that insulation, you also have that concrete, which is
a good thermal mass.
Yeah.
I think that key is having the insulation on the outside. When we were doing our research, it kind of blocks heat or even the cold air from even coming into the concrete.
Yeah, stop it before it gets to your building.
All right. So the next category we're going to cover is flexibility of space and design. And this is something that's important to us because we're designers. So we have a certain vision for what this home is going to be, this anti-contractor home. We think that wood would be under the good category.
Yeah, because there's flexibility. I mean, it goes close hand to hand with the renovation category because you can move walls, you can knock them down, you can change your mind with those things. And it's easy whenever you're doing construction to just say, hey, I want to add a wall here. And you don't have to go back to the shop where your steel was manufactured and have them make new parts. You can just go grab some new stock lumber and you're set to continue to change your design.
But in a stick frame construction, sometimes your interior walls are load bearing, which can be an issue because when you knock down a wall that's a load bearing wall, you have to reinforce it with a steel lintel or something that spans the distance where your load bearing column was. It can be done, but it's tricky. You're compromising the integrity. You're changing the way your home was actually meant to be built.
Right.
Something better than wood would be ICF or timber, because an ICF home, like we said, the walls are monolithic. Mm-hmm. They stand on their own. They don't need any sort of bracing. You can do whatever you want on the inside. It's an open plan.
Right. Yeah, and I think that's sort of the more open your plan, the better the flexibility for your design is.
Yeah.
Really is the answer, which leads us to our best category, which is steel. And the only reason is because steel can span longer distances than ICF or a timber frame can. So you have even more flexibility. They're all great.
Just look at industrial commercial spaces as an example. They require a certain sort of flexibility in their space because they don't have everything figured out when they're building these giant factories. They need an open space and do whatever they want to the inside. So that's our vision for this house too. So if we ever want to change a certain configuration of a room or a layout, we want that flexibility, and we think that steel's going to give us that.
Yeah, without it being as disruptive as it would be with a timber frame.
Yes. So that brings us to our last category, which is cost over the lifespan. So our least favorite would be timber. That would be under the good category.
It kind of seems like people do timber just for the aesthetic. Really doesn't seem like there's many advantages over stick. Like you can do the things you can do with timber with stick.
Yeah.
Except cover those long spans. But we're talking about cost though.
Yeah. The cost is not justified. From what we have read, from what we have researched, the cost of timber framing is not justified over the lifespan. So which is why we put stick in the better category.
Yes, because we know it's the best as far as upfront cost goes. But over the lifespan, there's going to be things that happen to it. Your studs are going to rot. There's a high probability that you're going to have leaks in your roof and things are going to need to be fixed. But it's pretty easy to go buy those and
they're not that
get expensive those changed out.
Yeah. And the cost can add up quick. I mean, you do foundation work, you have to fix something else, and it's a moving, permeable structure. That's what I think of as a wood home.
Yeah.
So to maintain it, to constantly maintain it every day or through its life it's going to add up. The cost is going to add up.
The best, in our opinion, when it comes to cost over the lifespan of the home would be, there's two winners with this. There would be steel and ICF. You pay a little bit more up front, but you recoup that money over time.
Yeah.
Because your home is better sealed, it's going to last longer, it's more durable, there's less to replace, you don't have to worry about things like termites. For those reasons, we feel like the upfront cost of steel and ICF are justified.
Yeah.
If you're considering the lifespan of the house.
Which everyone should. It's more sustainable.
I know some people's situations they're not looking to stay in the home forever, but in our particular instance and what we're trying to share with our audience is that you should learn more about your home. You should be in control of it. And it shouldn't be something so overwhelming that you need to hire different people for every little thing that goes wrong with it. Yes. You should be able to diagnose your problems and either tackle it yourself or know what's happening
wrong
when the contractor is working on it.
Yeah.
So that's just a brief overview of the different types of structures we looked at and how we feel they compare to each other under this good, better, and best rating system. So we're going to continue the podcast down the line. We started with the foundation of the home and building up through the structure. And now we're going to see how you can insulate your home.
Yes.
In particular, we're going to start sealing our home up. So we want to look at how you insulate the home and do waterproofing would be beyond that. But so the next podcast, we're going to investigate different types of insulation and how they differ from each other and what would be the most anti-contractor home friendly.
So until next week, I'm Belinda.
And I'm Chance.
And this is the Anti-Contractor Home Podcast. Thanks for listening. Thanks for watching.
Bye.
Bye-bye.